100 Acre is a singular thing. We don't make second labels from it. Either makes the blend or it goes in the trash.
You're listening to the Vint Podcast, bringing you expert interviews, alternative market insights, and exclusive access to the world of wine and spirits investing. Enjoy the show.
Hello, welcome back to not just another episode of the Vint Podcast. This is a breaking news episode. We have a new collection launching this weekend of 100 Acre Wraith bottles, and we have an interview with the CEO, Landon Patterson, that we would like to share with you all ahead of the launch. The collection includes 5 vintages of Wraith, which Wraith is one of their bottlings, as many 100 Acre is known for their single vineyard bottlings. Each vintage, however, they create a unique blend called Wraith, W-R-A-I-T-H, that is a blend of barrels from their top vineyards that are indicative of the vintage. So basically what they want to do is take a snapshot of each vintage and create the best wine possible from all of their vineyards. We have 2013 through 2017 in a vertical. This is as long as Wraith has been commercially released, and there's many 100-point scores in there, and each year, as long as Wraith has been produced, it's been among one of the top scoring wines in all of Napa Valley. This is also the first Vint collection that is sourced directly from the producer. We did have a futures offering with Joy Fantastic last year where we worked directly with the producer, but again, that was futures. This is bottles that have basically just been stored at 100 Acre, very small quantities, and otherwise they're only available on allocation only to list members. These are some of the few left, especially from the earlier 2013 and 2015 vintages, all stored at 100 Acre since they were made, and we're really excited to offer it. So we wanted to share this interview with CEO Landon Patterson and give you all a little bit more background and information ahead of the launch of the collection. We hope you enjoy. Here's Landon Patterson. All right, we're here with a very special guest, Landon Patterson. Thank you so much for joining the podcast, Landon.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, of course. So as we've mentioned in the Landon's intro here, he is now the CEO of 100 Acre. Is it Estates? Is that what the
company we call it? Our name of our company is called 100 Acre Wine Group. So now we used to have just 100 Acre Wine, which is still obviously our flagship and what we're known for. But we also have 2 new brands. One's called Fortunate Son and one's called Summer Dreams, that are new projects that we've been working on for the last several years that are just coming out. So now we get to be officially a group. So a super group, maybe that's the way to think about it.
Oh, exciting times. Awesome. Before diving into those, can you give us a little background on just quickly how you got into wine and then your path to 100 Acre?
Yeah, I laugh now, and I think my parents laugh that I get to run one of the highest end and most prestigious wines in the world because we grew up with no wine. We're a meatloaf, tuna casserole, Budweiser, King of Beers kind of house. And so as I started to get into food and wine, they were just found it so bizarre. They still do. I started my career actually in Las Vegas. I was dating a girl. I'm from Southern California. I was dating a girl who lived in Las Vegas, and I moved out there for the summer. And her father helped me get a job at Spago and Lupo, working at some of Wolfgang Puck's restaurants out there. Didn't know anything about food, didn't know anything about wine. The first night there, they said, oh, we have a frisee salad. I've never heard of frisee before. Confit, never heard of it. So I was like a hillbilly or something. It was like Beverly Hillbillies. But as I started to understand more about food and wine, it was really interesting. People wanted to talk to you about it at the tables and beyond. It's like they don't talk to you about their steak. There's the story of the pasta, but with wine, it felt really conversational. And that was something that I was passionate about. I ended up studying to become a sommelier and was a wine director in Vegas and in Long Beach, LA area. And then I started my path. I went to work out in France. I worked out in Italy. And I just decided that I think, this was a passion for me. And 21 years ago, no 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds were getting in the wine business. Like nobody was drinking wine. I was this young buck who was like, who's all excited about wine? Everyone else was maybe drinking Zima. That was as close to a wine as they had gotten. And yeah, as I moved from being a sommelier, I started working for wineries. And I realized that My passion was not buying wine or critiquing wine or whatever. It was working with small family producers. It's like they put everything on the line, all their money, all their this. And there's so many variables that go into making a good wine, a great wine, or a legendary wine. Some are in your hands or some aren't. And I love that process of working really hands-on with those smaller producers. Yeah, I worked for a few different producers. Chalk Hill's my first one. And then my friend's winery called B.R. Cone, small family winery in Sonoma. I've been with Acre now for 12 years. So it's been a great journey. Predominantly started in sales, marketing, and brand development. I've traveled 180 days a year, US, 40 countries in export. And then now I'm moving into more of a executive administrative role. So I still do some selling and I still do some chatting like this, but now it's lawyers, accountants, city planners. It takes a lot of work to get a wine made. Let me tell you, it ain't just great grapes and great fermentations and barrels. There's a lot that goes into it. It's been a fun transition for me as I've gone into my 22nd year in the industry.
Yeah, wow, that's quite the route there. I will say I come from a similar background. We were more of a Coors Light household than Budweiser, but that's really cool. And you must have seen so much growth. Just thinking about these smaller producers at the time, I guess when Jason Woodbridge started, it was probably, I know he came in well funded and he had a grand idea, but it was probably something small that's really blossomed into this world.
I think it's a common misunderstanding that Jason came into the wine business like as a rich guy. Because if you really think about it now, all the high end. So if you take, we don't use the word cult wine, but if you take the high end, super ultra premium wines in the Valley, the Harlans, the Screaming Eagles, the Colgans, a lot of these people came in with money already. They had been very successful lawyers and architects and titans of industry, or they're foreign companies. And Jason's really one of the only one that I know that got to this heights, but did it very pick and shovel. Yeah, he had to come in with a couple $1 million, but a couple $1 million doesn't get you very far in the wine business. So it was built very incrementally. We bought a property. We developed it. It took 7 years, and we bought another vineyard and we started making wine. We didn't even have a winery for the first 7 years of the production. And virtual wineries are like making wine at someone else's winery. That's now popular today. But back then in the early 2000s, that just wasn't done. It's like, if you don't have your own equipment, then tough. You know what I mean? We're not here to be your friend. Or it's just they need it. It's also just from a functional perspective. You're harvesting at the same time that somebody else is. They need their tanks. They need their crushers. They need their destemmers and all that. So it's all that stuff. So yeah, he came from more humble means, not to say in relative terms, and built it organically. And it's been now 20 years we just released our 20th vintage. And now obviously we're an overnight success that took 20 years. So it's one of those things.
Is it the same things 20 years ago that set 100 Acre apart and allowed it to take hold and grow within the region? Are those the same things that you think are setting your brand apart from other premium brands now? Or how has that changed?
Yeah. Jason, to give you a little background about him, Jason Woodbridge, he's our owner and he's also the winemaker. So that's very rare, actually. If you take all of our contemporaries, none of the owner is the winemaker. They have an owner, a consultant, a winemaker, a vineyard manager, vineyard consultants. They have a lot of that. We don't have that. He and his wife make the wine. And we have the same vineyard manager, Jim Barber, he's been working with for 20 something years. So we're a very tight core. And when he started getting into the business, this was he started getting interested in wine in the 90s. And the 1997 vintage was like the vintage where it was like 94 to 97 was the time where Napa, all of a sudden people were like, oh man, these wines are really good. That's when the term cult wine started, the Screaming Eagles, the Bryants, and all those types of wines. And 97 was like the vintage of all of a sudden globally people started paying attention. So when Jason got involved in that right around that time, we made our first wine, Kaylee Morgan, 2000. He's not a trained winemaker. He taught himself how to make wine. So he didn't go to school to make wine. So it's very odd, but other guys are like that too, like Manfred Krankel from Sine Qua Non, Thomas Rivers Brown. There's a lot now of guys that are really doing great wine, but they weren't taught the sort of like rigor of winemaking. And I think with Jason, what he did in the beginning and what he does now is he goes against the grain very often. He blazes his own trail. A lot of the techniques that we use in wine are were not used at all. Like we do a tremendous amount of punch and fermentation on our wines. So small 0.4 ton punch and ferments 20 years ago, nobody was using puncheons for fermentation. It was too much work. It was also too tiny of an amount of wine. But he realized that doing all these individual fermentations, these small lot fermentations, doing the punch downs by hand, it was a very visceral thing. It was like he put his face in every barrel, and he got to understand that like none of these barrels were the same. Each one of them had their own. Some were fermenting very hard. Some were fermenting very soft, hot, cold, different nutrients, different smells. And he was realizing that these micro ferments were the secret sauce. Because now when he does the blends, instead of maybe having 1 or 2 clones, maybe 5 or 6 blocks, he has 80, 90 individual fermentations, and they're slightly different. So he's got like more paints on the palette when it comes to blending. So as opposed to being like a 3-piece or a 5-piece jazz band, he's got like 100-string orchestra. And so he's able to really make something that's big, but also like extremely nuanced and very layered. And I think that's really the hallmark of what he did in the beginning. And he was just asked this recently in an interview. It was like, what are you doing differently now that you were doing before? He's like, nothing. We keep it really simple. When you come to our winery, it's not like smoke machines and gravity flow and LED lighting and it doesn't look like the Starship Enterprise. It looks like an Italian shoemaker that does everything by hand. Like the equipment they use is very good, but it's also very hands-on, extremely visceral. And I think that's really that's what people pay for at this price point. They don't want mass production. They want something that feels like a piece of art that's a one-off. It's never going to taste, we'll never make another one of these. And I think every wine, every barrel, and every vineyard at 100 Acre really has that. It's like in the core of its DNA.
Yeah. Wow. So just from a nerdy winemaking side of thing, so those barrels are on the side, and it's one of the flat sides just doesn't have its top, and he pushes down the grapes.
So he's got a puncheon, so it's a 500-liter barrel, and the bottom has got a head on it, a tail, and then open top. He has the heads off of them, and he's putting the grapes in there and doing the fermentations in there. And then when the cap, when it starts to rise up, he's like doing the punch downs by hand, like pushing those caps down by hand. It's very, very gentle and very visceral. Whereas like other people use like paddles, or they'll use pump overs, or they're using more like technology. It's obviously a paddle's not technology, but it's a little bit more rough, a little bit more intense. And I think he's like kneading the dough, work it, but not like overwork it and break down what's inside of it. And I think that's really key part. It also it's a very hard wine to make. There's no economies of scale. There's no fast way. And I think sometimes there's times that we've suggested the fast way to him, and he's like, I wouldn't even consider it. That's like spiritually does not align with what we're all about. It's a fun place and very unique in that one.
That makes a lot of sense. So for our listeners who may not know, when a red wine's fermenting, the carbon dioxide that's emitted pushes the grape skins to the top. And if you don't do anything, the red wine skin or the red grape skins or black grape skins will sit at the top, and then they'll dry out. So it's important to extract color and flavor, to push them down and have the wine either flow through them like a pump over, like he was saying, or push down and push down. You want that skin contact to be more universal, more throughout the barrel, as opposed to having all this like heavy tannin up at the top or color at the top. And you want it to be nice and smooth in that particular way of distributing the cap and the skins to get that color, phenolics and tannins and all those things in the wine.
I just found out about the 2 other projects. Do you think of them as distinct, or you might not like the term like second label? Are they from younger vines, or are they totally distinct projects? Because I just found out about them, and I was like, I didn't realize that they were new. I thought I just passed over. Tell us a little bit about those other 2 projects.
Jason has had other projects over the years. 100 Acre is certainly the one that's the most famous now, certainly the most accolades, but he's a really creative guy. He's always looking like at vineyards all the time. This is a guy who's probably seen 10,000 vineyards in his life. He's just constantly going and trying to find like the next like pot of gold somewhere out in the hills. You know what I mean? And he says oftentimes when he goes to a vineyard, I'll get to what we're doing, but this is good to understand why he does these things. Most people go in a vineyard and they walk in like very like up and down. They'll do backhoe pits. They'll do a lot of these different things. Like he does it all like emotionally. He's like, okay, this is a special place. You know what I mean? He's like, I get this feeling that it's a special place. And he's he doesn't get that feeling very often. So the new projects they're their own wineries. They're their own projects. 100 Acre is a singular thing. Jason makes the wines. He doesn't make other wines for anybody else. He's not a consultant. He does one thing. He has one job. All the wines at 100 Acre are estate. So we don't buy fruit from anybody. And then number 3, we don't make second labels from 100 Acre. It either makes the blend or it goes in the trash. It's like we don't bulk it out. We don't sell it to anybody. We don't kick it down to something else because Jason feels like 100 Acres is a singular thing. He's trying to go for perfect wine. So the new projects, one called Fortunate Son, is a new Cabernet red blend. It's Cabernet Bordeaux grape heavy or focus, project from Napa Valley. That's basically it's Jason working with these heritage farmers, these second, third, and fourth generation family farms. These people have been farming in the valley for a long time, and they're selling their fruit to other people, but they don't really care about it in the same way. It goes into the tank, maybe good fruit, maybe $20,000 a ton or something, but it goes into a bigger blend and it's just disappeared. And I think Jason felt like that's so sad. These are people that basically are like the fortunate sons and daughters, the founding people of the Napa Valley. And so he goes and works with them, and we work with them and we farm their vineyards and our blocks at the 100 Acre level now. So now we're going in there and spending 400% more in farming costs. I almost say we almost just like bonsai. We're like in there, like it's such a meticulous process. And he started working with these vineyards over like a couple of years. And then after 3 or 4 years, he's like, okay, I think these vineyards are ready to make wine. Fortunate Son has a Cabernet called the Dreamer, which is, I would say, younger vines, but vines that we have just started working with. You know what I mean? That have aspirations, that dream of being something bigger one day. And one wine called the Diplomat. It's Jason calls a 21st century new American claret. Put that on your label, boys and girls. And this is sort of his homage to the Cabernet Merlot blend, that claret style wine. He wanted to celebrate Merlot, and we found this unbelievable vineyard of Merlot that's a heritage vineyard, dry farmed, head trained, looks more like a Zinfandel vineyard. And then we make a single vineyard cab called the Warrior. And then we've just bought 2 properties that will become the estate vineyards for Fortunate Son. One was one of the oldest vineyards. It was the oldest contiguously owned winery in Napa, called the David Fulton Winery. It was first planted in 1860. The house that was on there was the 5th house built in St. Helena. So we built that and we're redeveloping it. That'll be the home of Fortunate Son. And then we bought another property just right on the border of St. Helena, Calistoga, that will become estate properties for this. So Fortunate Son will be a mix of our state stuff with these sort of partnerships, but all the wines are made at the 100 Acre level. The 18 and 19s were made at 100 Acre, Punch and Ferments and Oak in the same situation. So we've just relaunched this wine and people have been going bananas because you're getting just an unbelievably well-crafted wine at a third the price of 100 Acre. And then our other project's called Summer Dreams. And this is like Western Sonoma Coast project. This is Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc. Jason, I always think this is a challenge. It's like Cabernet producers always want to make Burgundy grape varietals, and Burgundy grape varietal guys like always want to make Cab too. It's like a chef. They want to do. So he's very good at making Pinot Noir, but this project has been him like really planting a flag out there. So we're working with some small out there now, but we're talking 250 case productions for each one of these wines, 300. So very tiny. And we're just having fun with it. The wines are fantastic, but we put them on our mailing list and they sold out in like 20 minutes. There's just not a lot of wine. So yeah, we've got a lot going on right now. It's a great time to be in the wine business with 100 Acre.
Brady, do you have any follow-ups with that? I know you probably have a million questions about which one you should buy and how you get more.
Yeah, I know a guy you can get you on the mailing list. I know a guy.
It's kind of maybe I don't talk about European wines enough with folks here, or I should just say French wines. Sorry, not European. French wines enough with folks here because I always hear, okay, like $600. This is ridiculous for a bottle. Although there are wines of same and caliber in France, that would be like, oh, give me a case. That's a steal.
Yeah.
How do you comment on that price point? It's a little bit jarring for some folks, even some of these other labels at $250. The Dreamer, I think, is maybe coming in around that price point, if I saw it correctly. But then you have wines like Screaming Eagle, $2,000-$3,000 on the secondary market. What's the story that you hope people take away from these premium producers out of Napa? Like, what's the main thesis around this price point wine?
I think since the 70s, the Europeans they've been doing it for hundreds of years. We're the new kid. We were the new kid on the block. And the new kid on the block is like, America, freedom. We don't care about your AOCs and your laws. We're blending. We got the cowboy vibe. The French, but interesting to Europeans in general, just looked at us like absolute pirates. And that was in the 70s and the 80s. And you know what? These guys were just like going out in the middle of nowhere and planting wine and trying to compete with the big boys. It is very much David and Goliath. And over the last 20, 30 years, I think we've incrementally been raising our profile, and it's not about quality. We've always had quality. It's like consistent quality. You know what I mean? When you talk about Latour or you talk about Lafite or something, they're talking about 100, 200 plus years of tradition. They're like, okay, great. You made 5 great wines. Hit me up when you made 40. You know what I mean? And so each decade that goes on that we have this really high consistency of quality, it's every year we win. We start to get a little more street cred. I'll tell you this, 10 years ago, I've been managing the global sales for 100 Acre for a long time. 10 years ago, I'd go to England and I'd go to Germany and places with 100 Acre. They would laugh. They were like, get out of here. This is a joke. I literally had a guy in England take a bottle. He was a big importer, and he took our bottle and in the beginning of our appointment, he rotated the bottle to the back and he saw the alcohol was 15%. He rotated it back and then ended the meeting. You know what I mean? It was that was the meeting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now we're selling, UK is our number one export market right now. We're selling a lot of wine in Europe. And it's almost like that Ford, you saw the movie Ford versus Ferrari. That Enzo Ferrari was the gold standard. And you got Carroll Shelby making Mustangs. And he's made a car that would win Le Mans. You know what I mean? And in the end, I think they really are understanding the craft of it. Our process is as laborious, if probably not more. We probably feel like we have more to prove. So we almost overcompensate in a lot of ways. On the price point front, it's been complex, but I will say thank you to the French and the Asian market, because the same Bourgogne Blanc I used to buy is now $80. The same white Bergs I used to buy, or Gevrys or whatever, are now $400 for not even the Grand Cru wines, for Premier Crus, Village wines. Everything's gotten more expensive at that really, if you are able to really be defined as craft, like proper, like the tip of the spear, I think people understand. It doesn't matter if you're making Keller G-Max or you're making 100 Acre or you're making at that level, like the guys that are at the top are really pushing the envelope. And I think whether you like the wine or not, you got to respect the hustle. And I think we've seen that in the sense that they're asking for the wines. So that lets us know we've made it. Jason doesn't give a shit about them in any real terms. But as far as the consumers are concerned, they speak, and they've been speaking resounding for us. But it's fun. I love French wine, by the way. You're talking to a guy I used to work in France. I love European wines, and they're just different. A Ferrari is different than a Shelby Mustang. They're both fast. They do it a different way, and they're for like different strokes for different folks. And I think that's what we really embrace.
I like your comment. I like your comment description of the wine art project, especially when you're going through the laborious nature of the winemaking process. I think that story, when you bring that in, I think starts to, for a lot of people, is what adds so much of the value too. It's not just the quality is going to be there, the consistency is there, and then the story kind of tops it all off.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add to that the parallel, while it is the wines are predominantly Cabernet based for 100 Acre, I do think the parallel is more similar to your point to Burgundy, where it is the smaller lots. It's more about the terroir and the effort that's going into making it, and the fact that you guys can't expand. You're not going to be expanding the Cayley vineyard's only so big.
Yeah. I mean, correlation's much more to Burgundy than it is to Bordeaux.
100%.
Because Bordeaux, they make a lot of wine. You know what I mean? Latour and Mouton make 20,000 cases of wine. This is not like, they're not that rare in relative terms to the production. They're very great wines, and they're artistically beautiful, and they do a lot of different things. We're more like Burgundy in the sense that we're like monopoles. You want to have Arc Vineyard, you got to buy 100 Acre. You want to buy Cayley Morgan or Few and Far Between, you have to buy it from us. We're not like, even now there's been a real trend in Napa. I don't think it's a good trend, but it is a trend nonetheless, of consulting winemakers. They're making wine for 50 wineries, and they're sourcing a lot from the same vineyards. So you see a lot of the same Tokelon, Dr. Crane, the Sleeping Lady. You see these vineyards on 80 different wines. They're all different, I'm sure, but they feel slightly less special because there is I'm out of this one. I'm out of the Dr. Crane from Paul Hobbs. Hey, try Myriad, try Realms, Dr. Crane. For us, it's like we get one ride. If you want to drink Clos de Tart, you get one ride. You know what I mean? And I think that's an important approach for us. And there is no scale. We're not making more wine, and we're not making second labels. We're not like diluting our specialness. When I do staff trainings, I tell people, I go, owner, winemaker, all estate, no second labels. Tell me the wineries in the world that do all those three things. And you'd have a really hard time counting to five.
Can you tell us? I think that's why wine people get bored maybe with Napa so quickly.
Yeah.
And they write Napa off as either monolithic or I think I mention this every time I can on the podcast. So this is the perspective that I think that people come to Napa Valley with, which is all these wines taste the same. They're all super high alcohol. They're all extracted and like jammy and fruit forward. And I think it's like a massive bell curve. And then there's producers like y'all and some of the other ultra premium where they're doing things that are so outside of this norm of that's our consultant winemaker, like you said, that produces 50 other places. All of our grapes come from the same vineyards. Yeah, I can't name the number of wines that come from To Cologne.
I know, and it's getting crazier. And you have to respect Beckstoffer for being a genius, but now he has Born, he has G3, so he has more vineyards to work with. And so there's this, I think people chase those grapes because they now know they have to justify the price. I need to charge $30. That's my mortgage. So if I go to Skippy's vineyard in Calistoga that nobody's heard of before and grind it out to make a $300 wine, like it's a harder grind to get the customer to pay it. But if I put Dr. Crane or Las Piedras or something like that, I get like into a club a little bit.
Free pass,
with Fortunate Son, that was really the whole rationale behind working with these family farmers. I could go buy a vineyard on Pritchard Hill. I could go buy Dr. Crane. I'm not crapping on those vineyards. The vines are amazing to come from there. Dr. Crane is one of my all-time favorite vineyards. But okay, we're going to pay $60,000 a ton. The wine's going to be $500. You know what I mean? So I think Jason was like, let me go find some stuff. You know what I mean? Let me go work with things and farm it for several years and earn it, as opposed to just going out and getting bling, gold plating a bottle and calling it a grand. You know what I mean? Which it does happen. That's economics. That's capitalism. As a guy who has to run the business, I understand that. But I think that's another reason why Jason's such a trailblazer is he hasn't fallen into that trap. It's a very easy trap to fall into.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. On that note, can you tell us a little bit about the 3 estate vineyards that you have for 100 Acre? And then we'll lead that into talking about Wraith as a coupe and what we have on the vintages in our collection.
Yeah. So we have 3 single vineyard sites that are our estate properties. The very first vineyard that was planted was called Kaylee Morgan. Just incidentally, for all your folks, if you start to see the name Morgan's Way on your wines, as 19 vintage moving on, it's going to be called Morgan's Way, which is Jason's daughter's name. Has always been there, Morgan, but his only daughter, so he like elevated this fully for her. That vineyard is a really fascinating site. It's in Santa Elena along the Silverado Trail. It's right in the nook of the beginning of the Howell Mountain Range. So it's right before the hillside. Jim Barber, who's Jason's best friend and who's just an absolute genius. These guys need to be like rock star status. The winemakers get the love. The David Abrews and the Jim Barbers and those types of people are really rock stars. Planted this vineyard that used to be a crappy Sauvignon Blanc vineyard. Used to produce like low end average SB because it's a clay soil. And Jim's, dude, this is clay, but this is like Pomerol, but 20 degrees warmer. So he did something very innovative and planted Cabernet there. And Jason, being who he was, is, okay, people say don't plant this here. Great, we'll plant this here and then we'll make a badass wine. What he started to realize was now you have this aromatic and flavor profile that's now the grapes are grown in a soil that everyone else isn't doing. So the flavor is unique. You get a lot of lilac, lavender, graphite, pencil lead notes, still wonderful fruit, but you get this almost like a really warm, like a super muscular, young, warm Latour. You know what I mean? Where you can get those notes in there. That's the beginning for us. That's which we just had our 20th vintage, what we've released. 2000 was the first vintage there. And then in actually 1998, Jason bought a property, a house and a hillside that ended up becoming the Arc Vineyard, which is our second vineyard, which is where our home is. That's where the winery is and all these types of things. And Jason bought this hillside that surrounded a very famous vineyard by the name of Chabot. Now, if people don't know the name Chabot very well, but in the 80s and 90s, Chabot was like Heights, Martha's Vineyard. Chabot was the core of Behringer's Private Reserve wine that got #1 wine in the world. Bacchus Vineyard from Insignia. These guys were these vineyards that were like early single vineyards that people said, these are like Grand Cru stuff. So this is like on a kind of a slight slope, Chabot is. And then Arc is like an amphitheater, 180-degree seating at 30-degree slope all the way around Chabot. So like Chabot is like the stage and on the low side, and then Arc is just all up and down this hillside 30-degree slope. So it's this epic vineyard. You don't see wraparound vineyards like that. And it has some unbelievable soil components. 3 different beachheads. It's like ancient beachheads have been flipped up and turned on their side. So you have this like really complex seafloor, volcanic, pyroclastic soils all mixed up. So it's like you want a geological nightmare, that makes great vineyards. That's it. This is it. And then the third wine that we have, the third vineyard, it's called Few and Far Between. And Few and Far Between is now up in Calistoga. And basically that is the upper slope of where the Islay vineyard is. So our neighbor is Islay or Arajo. This is basically at Islay, they don't have any slope. Everything is pretty much more valley floor. We are basically the upslope of all of that surrounding that. So we got like the high ground. And Jason renamed it Few and Far Between. Few is his son, Fisher, Everest, Woodbridge. And so those are the core of our brands. You have a clay soil that's more like valley floor in the nook of the hill, a mountains fruit vineyard, steep slope for Arc, and then Few and Far Between is more of a hillside vineyard with a lot of like gravel that gets more of that longer sun exposure because you're up in Calistoga, an hour and a half more of sun every day than the rest of the valley. And so each one of them are totally different. We're not cookie cutting. We really work hard to make sure the wines, we honor the terroir and the site. And that's been the core of what we've done until now, the new wines that we're about to talk about now.
Wow. But yeah, so just for everybody listening too, it gets more sun because the fog reaches it later. The marine layer that comes in every night reaches it later, right?
So there's a couple reasons. So if people have realized the Napa Valley, it's a valley, right? So there's a mountain on each side. There's the Vaca Range and the Mayakama Range. The Vaca Range is on the east side. The Mayakama is on the west side. So the more north you go, the mountain goes up and then it starts to dip. And there's a V right there in this Calistoga zone. So when the sun goes down and it goes behind the mountain, like behind like Oakville, it's still getting sun because that V, I'm doing a bad job of this, that V cut allows for the sun to peek through into the site. And then also opens up the Chalk Hill Gap and the marine layer to blow it in. As Calistoga is warmer than the rest of Napa, it's also colder at night. So you get that really strong diurnal temperature swing. And that's a real part of the terroir that's why when Bart found this vineyard, Arajo, in the 80s, this is the bomb. And so early on, it was identified and Jason just fell in love with the site and just wouldn't take no for an answer. So.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I didn't know. I've been studying for one of these wine exams coming up, my D3 one, and there's a few regions where they specifically talk about the shadows from certain mountains. So I was like curious actually to know if that was part of the case. That's really cool.
Yeah, to let the marine layer get in, right? The jet stream get in. And if a mountain is there, it's going to block it. So you don't really get a lot of maritime influence in Oakville or in that center zone of the valley, the heart of the valley. You got to go south, like Carneros, where it's cooler, and you're getting that San Pablo Bay, Petaluma Gap kind of jet stream, or more north where you start to get that Chalk Hill Gap. And so you're on 2 different poles here.
That makes a lot of sense. So tell us a little bit about Wraith. We have 4 vintages of Wraith that we're going to be featuring in our collection, or 5 actually. 5 vintages of Wraith. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about how that wine came to be and what makes it so special?
Yeah, Jason is a crazy son of a gun, and in 1,000 ways, but from a winemaking perspective, what I love about him is he's not stagnant. A lot of times people make single vineyard wines, one varietal, and it's kind of, okay, that's what we make. And I think he's always been on a quest to understand his vineyards better and understand the blocks and how they're reacting. And I think he had a vision in the late 2000, like 2008, 2009, about blending the wines and taking blocks and selections from Ark and Kaylee Morgan and making a wine. And the problem is if you're going to blend it, it's got to be better than them together in his mind. Because think about this, people don't blend down. They don't blend up, excuse me. They only blend down. They blend the second tier and they blend it. Why not even in Burgundy? You wouldn't take Montrachet, Batard Montrachet, and Chevalier and blend it. That would be, you'd have the most expensive Bourgogne Blanc and 80% of your wine would turn into devalue. Even if the wine was better, they don't allow it. Same in Napa. You don't take your best Dr. Crane, your best Los Piedras, your best Missouri Hopper and blend it up. You go, oh yeah, we make a single vineyard and here's our Napa blend. And Jason always said, that felt real dumb. Why would I not take barrels from and picks and blocks from my different vineyards and be able to do something more? And when he bought Few and Far Between in 2008, now he had a valley floor vineyard, a mountain vineyard, and a hillside vineyard. So he had a lot more material, and he started taking barrels and blending them and seeing what was going on and trying to make it work. He always says he felt like he was like cracking a safe. There was like 300 or 400 dials, and he's like turning it and trying to see if like he could make something that was like as good, if not better, but its own thing. And so the Wraith was really a labor of love. It was something he worked on for 10 years of working with these different sites. And so 2013 was just a banger. That's a vintage that will definitely go down as it's great for wine people because 12 and 13 were both good. Like a lot of people like 13. I'm more of a 12 guy. 12 was more like structured and more classic. 13 was like very hedonistic wines in general. But once he took the three vineyards and he put them together, he always makes a joke. It was like the dials all stopped and all of a sudden the vault opened. It was like, oh. And the Wraith is not. What's cool about it, aside that it's unique, is every vintage is unique. The Ark will taste Ark-like every year to some degree. It's a single vineyard wine. The Wraith is a different combination of percentages of vineyard, blocks, picks, puncheons, oak, all these different things every year. And so when we first started to release it, people didn't understand it. They were like, is this a reserve? Is this a second label? Is this they just couldn't wrap their brain about, wait, so is it more expensive? Is it more? So it was like, for a year, I was just like trying to like, now when I tell people to go, oh, that sounds great. That's genius. Well, in the beginning, people just totally didn't get it. And so what Jason's done is now he says is you can be in three places at once. You're in three of the vineyards at one time. You're getting a 1 + 1 + 1 = 10 sort of approach. And then from a winemaker's perspective, isn't it better to be able to have different barrels from different sites that have different components so you can make a wine that's more elevated? And so 13, 14, 15, 16, 4 vintages in a row of 100-point scores from Parker. If you were to taste those wines, they're not the same at all. They're like 4 totally different rides. And I think that now people have just gotten like very into it because it's kind of like Christmas. When the new release comes out, you're like, oh, it's a good vintage or a bad vintage of Ark or Kaylee or different. What's the new thing, that's happening? And I think not only is the quality fantastic, but the consistency is just off the charts because he's got more like a bigger mise en place, more ingredients or more things to cook with, make a more dynamic wine. And it's been fantastic.
Yeah. No, we actually recently had Lisa Parati Brown on to talk about her tasting approach. And I think in her review for the 2013, she wrote that the Wraith set a new bar, a new standard benchmark for what 100-point wines were. So that was really interesting to hear and just read through as I'm like reading about these wines and prepping the materials for our collection.
That wine too was like the first year, the 13, when we released it, the 13s were our very big wines. It's the vintage, is the big fruit, big tannins, just really opulent wines. And the 13 Wraith was a little more subtle for a moment, I think. And people were like, oh. And then about 9 months to 12 months into the release, this wine was just like fist pumping in the club. Like it was like, I am here to go. And it just became one of the most dynamic bottles we've ever made as far as like just this evolution in the bottle. And one of the other secrets to this is the wine is also, they're aged longer. So we're aging this wine. I think that wine was aged for 44 months in oak. And so the Wraith is generally aged another year more than the single vineyard wines to create more, give time for it to integrate and build complexity. It doesn't affect the oak flavor at all. It's really about like more time in the jacuzzi and like more time for integration and just a little bit more concentration in the wine. And that's really been a secret to our success.
Wow. So the 2013 was the first vintage, or was there a 2012 as well?
13, yeah.
Okay.
He made it in 12. He made it in 11. He made it in 10. It just never, we drank it. You know what I mean? It just never, he wasn't ready to say plant the flag on a new wine.
My mind's still going about that blending up approach. Never thought about that. I really like that. And it makes a lot of sense of why this wine is consistently scoring so high. I've noticed a couple while doing my research of one called like the Dark Wraith or some other different
Dark
like
Arc.
bottling arc as well. Or there might be a different race. Sorry, I don't know if there's another name, but a few alternate names. What are those? Are they just like sub or little projects that he's having as he's...
What you're probably really talking about is we have one called Wraith Crypt.
Oh, Crypt. Sorry, yeah.
So these are all like, I guess they're all dark sounding, or it's like Norwegian death metal or something like that. Or maybe we're more like Iron Man, guys that did Iron Man, not Ozzy Osbourne's band.
Oh, yeah, Black Sabbath.
Black Sabbath. We're probably more like Black Sabbath, like down tuning and like a lot of like that. But what these are basically now, Jason, taking specific blocks, barrels, picks out of a single vineyard and then doing something with that. So he's like riffing. He's not staying static. He's trying to do new things. And I think for him, because we do all these micro fermentations, since we isolate all these picks and blends, we can do that later and do unique kind of sub wines, do 5 barrels, 2 barrels, 3 barrels. The Dark Arc, which is a small production block of the Arc, we've only released the 15 and the 16. It is so good, but it's like dark. It's a darker flavor profile. It's not a more high alcohol or more sweet, like more fruit or anything. It has just like the aromatics in the fruit is like a darker, like more blue to black kind of in those flavor profiles. And it's really fun. People love that. They love those small production wines from us.
And there's vintages in this collection that we have. You touched on it, but 13 to 16 are just a stretch of incredible vintages. It sounds like maybe we might get something similar on this other side of 2017 with 18 to 22.
Yeah.
I've heard only a little bit about 22 so far, but 18, 19, really good so far out of the gate, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, even that in 2017, when a lot of the producers in the region struggled, you guys still got 98 plus points, whatever that, plus means from Wine Advocate. And there was only 100 the whole year. So you guys were still one of the top wines in all of Napa.
It's a rare opportunity in California as a whole to find that off vintage where you might be able to get some like really strong.
Before she left, that's totally true. Before Lisa left to start the Wine Independent, we were her last tasting. She came and she tasted and went through everything. And I think Jason's proudest moment was the top 3 highest rated wines of the vintage. We had 2 of them in 17. He's like, that's the winemaking right there. He goes, that's where you got to grind. He was more proud of the Wraith Crypt got 99 and the Wraith 17 got 98 plus. He's like, I don't even know what plus means. Are we doing minus now? But he was like very proud of that. And I think Lisa was really impressed because it's dude, what you do in 16 and 13, you better make great wine. Okay, God gave you this stuff. It's what you do in 17, what you do if you're in the Rhone and you're in like 02, you're in certain areas where, or you have tough years in Burgundy. It's like those producers that make great wine and tough things. It's not about great quality. It's about extremely high quality, consistently all the time, every time. That's what makes you an icon. That's what makes you Michael Jordan. That's what makes you Tiger Woods. That's what makes you Serena Williams. That's what makes Jason Woodbridge or Manfred Kringle or any of these other top producers is they've been doing it at a high level for a really long time.
Awesome. On that note, how is this vintage looking? Is 22 looking pretty sharp?
Oh my God, 22. It's like you get this good news, bad news thing. Okay, there's no fires. Okay, great. That's a very good piece of news. We have no 2020. So just from let me say this because I think it's important, and then we'll talk about 22. Your investors that are looking to invest in this collection, we have no 2020. Our supply is crazy low. It's the lowest it's ever been. And so that's driving demand. Our demand has been really high. And with this collection, this is an ager. This is one that's definitely, we wanted to do this, and I batted around a little bit with like, all right, if we're going to do it, let's do it. 22 was a fabulous vintage. It ended, by the way, I'm not going to say anything negative, but it was challenging in the sense that we had the hottest week in the history of Napa Valley in the first, like just after Labor Day. For 2 weeks, you had 2 days that were 116 degrees. You had some vineyards that got up to 117. It was 102 at night, at 9:00 at night that day. That is hardcore. And you had vineyards that were picking September 3rd that had picked October 3rd the previous year.
Yeah,
That's
wow.
not good. That's not good. You may have got, as Jason said, he goes, fantastic. You got to your bricks level. Are your seeds brown? Are your phenolics there? Did the grapes ripen, or are they just sweet? You know what I mean? And so that was something that he would wait. And then after that, it rained like 4 inches of rain. So we had this like super heavy heat and rain. But as his custom with Jason, he's we don't take the cake out of the oven before it's cooked all the way. So we waited through all of that stuff, and we got a banger vintage. We really are impressed with the vintage. But I think it'll be interesting. It'll be a vintage where I think you're going to see some variation. That's I never asked this from anybody, but I would ask, like, when'd you pick? And you get people in that early September. For Cabernet, I'm only speaking Cabernet, by the way. That's complex. That's going to be very difficult to make a wine that's extremely complex and has a lot of dimension.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, to your earlier point as well, these wines are coming directly from your library, and there's some of the, especially for some of the older wines, some of the last cases you guys have in the library, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. We've had so much. When a wine gets like 100-point score and then a second vintage and a third and fourth, there's people are like piling on. And we don't really play the game. If you've been with us for a long time, if you've been working with us, if you've been supported us before we were anybody, we don't just like, just give it out to everyone. We try to be very fair about things. And so we're not like hoarding this. We sold these wines out. We wanted people to take them in their cellars. They were being drunk in restaurants. And our supply of it is the lowest among anything that we have as far as that was concerned. And so that was also a factor to get something that not just was high rated and delicious and great vintages, but something that we're not sitting on.
So you have obviously looked favorably upon this kind of investment space in some way, but not every producer does. Not every producer would be willing to have a direct relationship with an investment firm and sell their wines into that space. I think we think of ourselves as pretty producer friendly, and we try to be really accessible to those relationships. But what's your perspective on the role of investment groups or people purchasing wine and selling it back into a secondary market for investment? You think that's a positive thing overall, or what's kind of perspective there?
Look, there's wine selling and trading in secondary markets and tertiary. That's been happening for 3,000 years. Buy wine, they move it, someone buys it, blends it, so all those types of things. I think the internet made it really complicated for buying wine. They made it easier to buy wine online, but it became this trader system. Like I had gone to a tasting. A buddy had a 40th birthday, his 82s, and he had bought all these 82s of Bordeaux's, and many of them just didn't taste very good. And they tasted like tired. You know what I mean? Like way more tired. And you buy them on WineBid, you buy them on this, you buy them on that. They've been traded 7, 10,
back and forth across
times.
The ocean. Yeah,
shipped all FedEx. You think your FedEx driver gives a crap?
Sure.
That part has been complex for the buyer. So I think this type of situation creates an environment where the provenance is perfect. You know what I mean? That in provenance in luxury wine is everything. I don't care if it's the greatest vintage and the thing. If it's drunk for an hour, it's done. And so I think for us, we don't work with any auction houses. A lot of wineries sell wine. We don't do that type of stuff, not because we don't know what's happening. We don't know what they're doing. It's been, there's a lot of, and all the counterfeit, all the Rudy Kernam crap and all that type of stuff. So we've never done any of that. So this is a way that we can let people invest in our wines and hold them in a sacred space and give them the love that they deserve. But also we can guarantee the provenance of the wine to them, because that's really important to us. We're interested in, we put a lot of work into making these great. And so I think on the investor side of things, it's only direct from the winery once. You know what I mean? And so this is that, we're checking it out. Your CEO's known me for a while, so he buttered my bit. He told me, Landon, you're so good looking. Your beard is good. No, but when he and I told me about the opportunity, I'm an investor. I collect wine. I do stuff. So I asked myself the first question: is this something that I would be interested in doing? And then I answer yes. So then why wouldn't we want to be associated with that? So I think that's a cool thing. There won't be a lot of collections from us. That's not because we don't love you. It's because we just don't have right now. Our supplies are at the lowest, but I think that just makes each collection that much more special.
Yeah, agreed. And I think to go back to something that you touched on as well, when we are storing these wines, and this is something we talk with many producers when we're storing their wines, it's going to be in pristine condition. They're going to be taken good care of so that when they do end up being sold on to the next one, it's not like they were just held in some random place or under a bed or something.
For sure.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much. This has been really interesting. I don't want to take all of your day here, but I want to give Brady one more chance to ask another Napa question before we go. Do you want to just ask, he's been really investing in, or not investing necessarily, but buying mountain fruit based wines. Brady, do you want to?
I recommend that.
So is it, other than Howell Mountain, it's the best place to buy wine from in Napa?
Look, if your best is all somewhat relative, I think the king of mountain fruit is
your best. That's what I mean. Your best.
Our best, you're saying?
For you personally.
Oh, me personally. I'd say two things. If money was like, if I could go buy a vineyard tomorrow and own it myself, Pritchard Hill is pretty damn special. The dirt, the red dirt, all that volcanic tufa and pyroclastic and the aspects of that area. And there's a reason why there's great producers making great wine for a very long time there, but you're paying like buku dollars for that's for sure. Still some great Chapelet has some wines that are still like way undervalued, that are extremely good quality from up there. That would probably be my favorite. I'm really getting down on Coombsville, man. I'm really enjoying that. That's an area that's in the southeastern sort of section for your listeners of Napa. It was kind of like an area that like nobody cared about. And all of us, and there was a couple guys like John Caldwell planted vines there really early. There's a cool Chardonnay. Fela has a Chardonnay vineyard in Coombsville that just makes banging wine. So that area is very interesting. It's not so much mountain. There is some mountain, some elevation there, but it has a diversity in Napa that you're seeing more homogeneity with regard to what's being planted. There's a lot more like riffing going on out there. And I think that's a really cool area to try new things in Napa Valley. And just like the tasting rooms are probably a little more pumped to see you because they're not like on the Silverado Trail or 29. So you probably they won't charge you $250 to have a communion's worth of their little wine. They may be like, hey, come on in, have a seat. That's becoming very rare in Napa Valley, I can assure you.
Outside of Napa, if you think of Syrah or Pinot Noir, which do you let go and which do you keep?
Oof. That's a tricky one. I'm going to a dinner tonight and I'm bringing some Clap Cornas 2016 in Magnum. So I'm I will say I'll kick Pinot only because I love Burgundy. I drink a lot of white Burgundy though. I'd say probably I like white wines with acid and minerality. And with reds, I love Cornas. I love Côte Rôtie. I love that because you can get the fruit in the wines with that roasted meats and white pepper spice and all that. I find that really interesting. And I just have to also say, dude, for $50, you can get a banging bottle of wine in the Rhone. For $50, you get a pretty average bottle of wine in Burgundy now. I've got little producers that I drink that I bring somebody a $30 bottle and they're like, never heard of it. And it's really delicious. You still look at even Beaucastel's $100 a bottle. It's less than 100. Chateau Leneuf, $80. La Vie d'Anjon. So these are wines that are like legends in the area and they're like cheaper than a really bad cabin. I would say if I have to pick, I'll go Syrah and I'll go definitely Rhone Rangers, Rhone Daddy style for sure.
Nice. You passed the test on those questions. And
I'm a real wine drinker. I really like wine. I have a diverse collection. Yeah.
I trick people. I say, what's the best? And I really mean favorite, but I trick them into getting a soundbite. But I'll be flying out to drink wine with you soon then.
Yeah, man. Come on down. Let's do it. I got all kinds of, I'm going to I'm doing one of those dinners tonight where it's an Asian restaurant. Everyone bring a bottle. So there's going to be all kinds of funky stuff here. And I always like to, tonight I'm going to bring the Cornas, but I'm also going to bring a bottle of Ibn Sadi, his wines from South Africa. So he's one of the legends of regenerative farming. So this is a 7 white grape varietal, average vine age, 90-year-old bush vine, dry farmed from Swartland. And dude, this wine is the bomb.
Wow.
But nobody gets it. You blind this on people, then they're not going to get it. But they're like, whoa, this is really cool from South Africa. So we'll be nerding out tonight.
Nice. You should check out Monochrome and Pastor Robles if you don't know them.
Monochrome. I've heard of them, but I haven't heard the wines.
Blending like Chenin and Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay all together.
Yeah, I'm like, I like that. That's my
bizarre,
that's
really bizarro stuff. They make like 110 cases kind of thing, and it's just the winemaker who he does the tastings with you when you visit. That's the stuff.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'll check it out, man. I always appreciate that stuff.
Awesome. Landon, thank you so much for the time. We appreciate you coming on.
All right. Happy hunting, everybody. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.
Thanks. All right. That was our interview with Landon Patterson. I hope everybody learned a little bit about 100 Acre and is excited for our collection. It'll be coming out shortly, and we hope everybody is able to get some shares. We'll be back with another episode at our normally scheduled time next week. Cheers.
To check out our current offerings and to sign up for the Vint platform, find us at www.vint.co. That's www.vint.co. For questions, comments, or feedback on the Vint podcast, please email us at support@vint.co. Vint and VV Markets are offering securities pursuant to Regulation A. Our offering circular as amended can be found on the SEC website. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Investments such as those on the Vint platform are speculative and involve substantial risks to consider before investing. We may provide communication that may contain certain forward-looking statements that are subject to various risks and uncertainties. Information provided in any communications, including this podcast, is not legal, business, or tax advice. All prospective investors should consult a legal, tax, or business advisor concerning the subject matter of any communications and any offering.